Section 1 of the ATAR English exam. This section is one of the most difficult in the whole exam. Many students struggle, and quite often students fail just 1 or 2 responses in this section due to not knowing the features of the text enough. This statistically scores a lot lower, this section. That's because you're required to actually read, annotate, and then write a response to 3 different texts. Each year, the organisation of the Section 1 will change. Some years, you'll answer 3 separate questions about 3 separate texts, and none of your answers will relate to the other. At other times, you'll be asked to compare text 2 and text 3 in the question 3. Because of the difficulty of Section 1, I always advise students to spend a little bit longer in this section. I advise them to sacrifice a bit of time off Section 3, where you don't need to write as much to prove that you can write well, and where hopefully the opportunity to use your personal voice will allow you to do better. I'll talk more about Section 3 in another tutorial. In Section 2, you still use your full 60 minutes, but I advise that in Section 1, you use 70 minutes. That would be split up then into 20 minutes to write the response, 3 minutes for each text to annotate it. And of course, you can read the text in your reading time, but you may skim over it again. The main thing is that you do always annotate the text, because by doing so, you're helping write your response from the very start. To annotate text, you have to have a really good understanding of the conventions of the text type. So today we're going to go through a narrative reading, and I'm going to model how I do it. You have to know your conventions, and you have to know them well. Just like you wouldn't go into a chemistry or maths exam without reviewing the formulas, you cannot go into an English exam without reviewing the conventions. And this is the thing that is letting students down in their responses. They are not knowing what conventions are being used by the author, and they can't talk about the effect of those on the reader. And then they can't answer the question, because the question usually is related to some kind of values or issues or idea, and it requires you to show how that text uses those conventions to construct this big idea or issue. So I'm going to model how to annotate a text and do better in Section 1. Okay, the first section, there will be 3 texts and 3 questions, and you need to comprehend and analyse unseen, written and visual texts and respond concisely in approximately 200 to 300 words for each question. Now, there's an example here of a narrative. So it used to be that they would have 1 narrative, 1 non-fiction and 1 image. They are not doing that anymore. They're doing whatever they want to surprise you. Last year's WACE had 2 images and a non-fiction narrative, an autobiography. So you have to research all the text types. You have to know the techniques. And I'm going over to the exam revision booklet, and those techniques are listed here in the table on the 2nd page. You need to learn these. People say in English you can't do well, like it's all subjective and you can't study for English. That is not true. You would never go into a WACE or a chemistry exam without memorising formula and figures and how to read them. Do not go into an English exam without knowing how non-fiction, how narrative and how images work and construct meaning. Every question you are answered will ask you to do 2 things. They will ask you how, which is all of these techniques. And then they will ask why or effect. All right, no matter how complicated the questions are, whether they're the simple questions in section 1 or the more complex questions in question 2, this is the basis of all English. How and why. All right, what's the effect on us? So memorise those, write them out, put them on brainstorms on your bedroom door. Look at your texts and write out how many conventions each of them use. All right, so in section 1, you're going to do it second, and you need to spend that time annotating the text. Bit by bit, a lot of times we read these questions and we think, I don't understand what it's about. I'm the same. I often first read it and go, I have no idea what this text is about. Nobody can just comprehend anything like that. But if you pull it apart, word by word, line by line, all of a sudden the meaning starts to become clear. He arrived home from school and slipped into the dead feeling. So instantly, the word dead suggests conflict. So he's arriving home, which should be a place of safety, but he feels dead inside. As usual, the hallway was littered with purple post-its, so old they'd lost their stickiness. The first in his mother's notes read eat. So look at the capitals. So we all know when you write in just capitals, it signifies yelling. So the first in his mother's note read eat, followed by others with linked arrowheads that pointed to the kitchen. On the fridge, a new note read, milk's off, only good for tea. So look at these short, sharp sentences. There's no emotion. There's just directions. He's being told what to do. There's no love, what you'd expect from a mother. On the stove, the usual note in red marker, don't touch. So another demand. He sat at the kitchen table and lined up the crackers and jar of peanut butter. He moved aside the note on the napkin holder that read, after snack, homework. In the living room, the yellow post-its on the TV screen read, don't you dare. So more demands. In his bedroom, on his desk, she'd written a ruled sheet of yellow paper, check your homework, twice, which is underlined. On his DS game, only if you've done everything else. In the bathroom, on the toilet, her faded scribbles, flush, wash, hands. Stuck to the front of the soap dish, count to, and 25 is crossed out, then 50, slowly. So here, there's lots of short, sharp sentences, which starts to read like a list of commands towards the boy. And again, there's been no love and affection yet. So if we look at the question, explain how text 1 represents the relationship between the two characters, we already know. We haven't even read the complete text yet, and we already know that the relationship is distant, it is unloving, it is unkind, and the boy does not feel welcome in his own home. On her bedroom door, stay out. His father had walked out on his mother when she was pregnant, hadn't even waited to see what she had given him. Lately she had taken to calling the boy the man of the house. Under his bedclothes, pinned to his flattened Paddington bear, another note, toss. So here you've got this juxtaposition between this little boy, and he keeps being called boy, but then she calls him man, and she's telling him to throw away his teddy bear. So we get the idea that the mother just wants him to grow up and stop being a burden, stop being a child that she has to worry about and tell what to do, and that he can take over some of the responsibility because she doesn't have a partner and the partner's left her. He returned to his mother's bedroom door, sniffed at its cracks and inhaled the traces of her face powder and spicy perfume. Now this here reveals his desperation for affection. He's sniffing at the cracks of the door, but he's so scared of her, he doesn't dare to go in. So here we get the idea that he's just lacking that emotional connection with anyone. At 6 o'clock, when he heard her car pull into the driveway, he reached for the stack of orange Post-its. He waited inside the front door, Paddington Bear clutched to his stomach. His mother stopped short. He had stuck the Post-it to his forehead. Free, please take. He pushed out past her and took up his position on the street. Now, the title itself is called The Gutter, and the gutter, like there's an old saying, washed out with the gutter or thrown out in the gutter. Basically, in the old days, people used to, just toss all their filthy toilet water and everything in the gutter to be washed away, and rubbish and everything would accumulate. So basically, the boy feels so unloved that he feels like he just wants to throw himself out into the gutter. So the question asks, how is the relationship represented? What techniques would we talk about? Well, we've talked a lot about syntax, sentence length. We've talked about the lack of emotive words. We've talked about the commands. We've also talked about the boy. Home doesn't feel loving or safe. He says it's like a death feeling. Talk about him, his teddy bear, how he wants to be a boy still, but she wants him to grow up. Now, in this section here, you can write in any way you like, but this is what I recommend, and I'll tell you why. I recommend that you start with a thesis statement and then write in 2 paragraphs, leaving a couple of lines between them. The reason being, yes, really good writers can write in 1 paragraph, but not all of us are really good writers. I myself would not write in 1 paragraph because perhaps if I was writing this response here and I decided my first one was all going to be about the grammar, the sentences, the punctuation, which is not something I'd often write about, except in this text it's really important because in this text it conveys so much meaning. But if I was going to talk about it and I started writing all this stuff about the syntax, and then I moved on to talking about the mother and the boy, and then I remembered, oh, that's right, I've thought about something else about the way the sentences are structured, I'd be going back and forth and forgetting stuff. So what I find is if I separate it into 2 ideas, 2 sort of things that the text seems to be doing. And a lot of these questions, they're all 2 halves. They ask how and effect. So this is how text 1 represents, so that's all the techniques, the relationship between the 2 characters. You could do the boy and the mother as 2 paragraphs and then talk about the language use. So there's no right or wrong way, but I just find if you split it into a couple of paragraphs, people tend to not forget what they're going to say, and they tend to then expand on it. And then you leave a line in case you want to go back and you think of more ideas and you can add it in. So in this sort of response, I'd be talking about how the sentence length conveys that there's a lack of emotion, there's a lack of love between the 2, the short, sharp sentences, the notes on Post-its, even the fact that he's left alone and has to do everything himself while his mother's at work. That all conveys the fact that the relationship is strained and that she's so busy working that she hasn't got time to bond with her son. And then the second one, I would talk all about how the boy is, so this is sort of about the mother because we only hear about the mother through these notes. In the second one, it's all about the boy, and we talk about how he still wants to have a loving relationship. He's desperate to connect with his mother on some level, but she is just ignoring it.